So that brings us to today's Sandbox Challenge. And for the Sandbox Challenge today, I'm going to introduce you to something called the Turtle module in Python. And Turtle is based on something called Logo, which was created in the 1970s. And the reason it's called a turtle is because the original version of this actually had a physical robotic turtle. It was like this big, that you could program to draw lines on a giant piece of paper. And they use it to teach kids math. But programming with Turtle gives us a lot of really interesting capabilities. So let's introduce that. I'm going to show you where to get to this. You don't have to do it right now, but I'm just going to walk you through it. Obviously, it'll be on the video and uploaded to the class. So on most of our Sandbox challenges, there's a lot of step-by-step instructions. And that's kind of on purpose. Usually it'll start out with a very step-by-step, copy this or retype the code. Sometimes you copy and paste it. Sometimes you retype it. It kind of depends on what you want to do. Sometimes it is useful to retype code by looking at it because it gets you used to typing different commands and how they're put together. Sometimes copy and paste is just fine. But it'll explain how this code works. And so this is our first basic program. And so I am going to run this in PyCharm. You will not be able to run this in online Python because it requires an external module, and that's beyond the capabilities there. So I'm going to create a new PyCharm file here, and I'm just going to show you how this works. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to name it s1.py, or actually this is s2, sandbox 2. And let's zoom in on the code here and copy that, paste it here. Let's review this code real quick so you can see what it means. The first line is import turtle. Import is a word that we use in Python when we want to add an external library or an external module to expand the commands that we have available in Python. Now there's a turtle module that allows us to do all of this stuff with the turtle. And the first thing I need to do is create an instance of the turtle object. Don't worry about what that means right now. Just have a little faith because it'll all make sense later in the class. But we don't need to know why that is what it is. But we're creating a new turtle. And then we're going to tell the turtle using turtle.circle, and we're going to give it a value of 100. And what that means is we're going to draw a turtle that is 100 pixels in size. And then these last two lines basically say, hey, don't close the window right after this is over because we want to see our beautiful artwork. So when I run this, let's give it a moment and then open this. There is my turtle window. And you can actually see this is a turtle right here, this little, and it's shaped like an arrow. You can actually change the shape of your object to a little turtle if you prefer. You can change the size, the color, you can draw different shapes, you can do all kinds of different things. So we're going to play around with this turtle in this sandbox. But if you read on, it kind of explains how things work. And then what it says is instead of the turtle code or the circle code, so instead of this, try these lines. So it says, my turtle forward 70, my turtle right 90, forward 70, right 90, forward 70, right 90, forward 70. Somebody tell me what I'm drawing here. A what? A staircase? Think about giving it directions. Okay, so if you're telling me, right, go forward 70, turn right 90 degrees. Exactly, forward 70, right 90. So I'm just repeating that same thing until I draw a square. And so when I run it, there's my square. Okay, so you guys are getting the hang of this pretty quickly. Now, here's an interesting thing I can do is, and this is where variables get kind of powerful. Can we all look at this and agree that I'm still drawing a square? Right? Yeah? Because now I've created a variable called int side and set it equal to 70. And now I'm using that value every time I go forward in the square. So that's the length of the side now of the square is 70. And if I run that, oops, I already had it going and I messed it up. There's my square. But the interesting thing now is that if I want to change the size of the square, I only have to change one thing in one place, right? What do I change? Let's say the square is going to be 200 pixels in size now. What line of code do I change? Inside. And what do I put here? 200, right? So now I can change the size of my square by changing only one line of code. Can you imagine if I had something that drew something with 100 sides to it, right? I could make something a lot more powerful that way. And I still only have to change one thing to change the whole size of everything. And so what I want you to do as you go through this is I want you to play around with this code and see what other fun ideas or other shapes you can come up with. And I'm sure that you can probably deduce, if you think about it, that if there's a forward, what's the opposite of forward? Back. If there's a forward, there's a back. If there's a right, there must be a left, right? So, and you've already seen that you can draw a circle. You can also look up other turtle commands. If you look up Python turtle commands, you can see all kinds of different things. For this assignment, all I want you to do is get this far and then play around. Mess around and find out. Okay, that's what the sandboxes are all about, is just getting your feet wet with playing with variables. So this is using a variable in a very practical way, in a very powerful way, because it allows you to really zero in on how much you can change by changing only one line of code. And we'll use variables in every assignment moving forward in this class. We'll use print in almost every assignment moving forward in this class. We're going to use input for several weeks now. So learn how to use those. Okay, that's the primary objective, is learning to use variables, learning to use print, to use input. If you're comfortable with those, the next steps are going to be real easy for you. So make sure you have a good grip on how to use those things, play around with Turtle. And here's an interesting thing. If I want to do something really cool, imagine this. Input right? Now I'm asking the user to tell me how big the square is going to be. Now, there's one thing that you have to know here. The side has to be an integer. It has to be an integer because I can't make a square that is Bill in size. But everything that comes back from input is a string. Even if I type 70, it is not reading that as a integer 70, it's reading it as a string 70. So if I wanted to do something like this, that's a little bit fancier, I'm going to give you a little shortcut. Don't worry about how it works. We'll explain it later. But I'm going to wrap that input in another function called int. And what that does is it takes, if the user types a number, it will turn it into an integer, and then it will work. So watch this. If I say, how big is your square? 300. And then I switch to my turtle. There's my 300 size square. Now, here's the downside to that. If I run that and I type 20, what do you think is going to happen? It's not going to work. It's going to give me an error because the word 20, we understand what that means. But all Python sees is the characters in the word 20, T-W-E-N-T-Y. And it doesn't know how to change that to an integer because it can't make meaning in that way. So there's some trade-offs for how we do that. You're going to get into that later, but if you want to play around with using input to specify things like this, I could also put an angle here using an input, but it would also have to be an integer. Actually, the angle technically could take a float or an integer, but either one will work. Anyhow, so if you want to play around with that, just remember you have to convert to the right data type, otherwise you're going to get spanked by the computer. All right, so that's it for today. We are just a few minutes short of time, so if you want to play around for a few minutes or ask questions, have at it. Otherwise, we'll be back next week, and we'll pick up, I believe Module 2, Part 2 is next week, if I'm remembering the lecture schedule right. So I'll actually go over Assignment 2 on Monday.